It's Whcr, the boys all along.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is Rick Young, another segment of What's in Your Hand here at WHCR 90.3 FM. One of the things about success that I know, the little that I do know about success, is that repetition. I remember boxing, learning how to throw a jab or a combination. You have to do it over and over and over again. And sometimes I say, why you keep playing that over and over again or reading that book over and over again? But if you hear a song you like, you're not going to play it one time and never listen to it again. So I say repetition is one of the ways of learning, and we're going to talk about that with my guest. But I have to play this piece again. I played it a little earlier, and it really inspired me. The Jim Rohn piece. Let's do it again. That was a movie. Let's do it again.
I want you to ponder these 4 questions. The first question to ponder when you go home is why? Why go this far? Why try to learn this much? Why study? Why put yourself out? Why try to earn as much as you can earn, share as much as you can share? Why try to become all that you can possibly become? Why develop yourself to the full? Why try to do it all? Why try to take on this much responsibility? Develop every skill you possibly can. See every human you possibly can. Go to every class you possibly can. Touch everybody you possibly can. Why do that much? Why go that far? Why share that much? Why give that much away? Why try to see everything? Why try to do everything? Why try to become everything? The first question to ponder when you go home is why. Here's another good answer to why. It's the second question. Why not? Why not see how much you can earn? Why not see how much you can learn? Why not see how many skills you can develop? Why not see what kind of person you can become? Why not see what kind of influence you can have? Why not see how many people you can rescue from oblivion? I want you to take that personal. Why not? Why not? You've got to stay here till you go. I mean, what else are you going to do? Why not see how much you can do, how far you can go? Now here's number 3. Why not you? You've got the brains. You can make decisions. You can study the plan. You can change your life. You can grow immensely in the next few years. You can make your dreams come true. You can build a financial wall around your family nothing can get through. You can become healthy. You can become powerful. Why not you? My very last question on the questions to ponder is why not now? There never was a better time. And what a time now for us to take this dream and not let it die. Take this dream and give it life. Take this dream and breathe into it your own personal spirit until finally it becomes a flame that burns around the whole world.
Wow. Jim Rohn. I love the part when he said, build a financial wall around your family. Man, I really, really like that. I want to give a shout out to Diego, all the way over there in Sao Paulo, Brazil, listening to this program, What's in Your Hand. And he gave me 2 hands. He put 2 hands up. I don't know what that means. I see 2 hands up. Diego in Sao Paulo, Brazil, is listening to What's in Your Hand right now. That's powerful. And with that said, I'm going to bring on my guest because I'm very, very excited for him to share what he's going to share. And my guest, he's a nationally recognized expert on direct selling and sales leadership. He has built a legacy sales teams and experienced unprecedented success in individual and business-to-business markets as well as the network marketing industry. My guest has held executive-level positions for Fortune 500 companies, but he has never strayed from the art and science of selling, which he loves. In early 2014, my guest began writing, speaking, and coaching through his proprietary platform, The CAP Equation. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome for the first time to What's in Your Hand, to WHCR, Joe Bozzello. Good morning, Joe. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning, Rick. I'm doing great. You know, it's early over here in L.A. You know that, right?
Yeah, what time is it over there now?
It's 3 hours earlier. It's 4 something, and I set my alarm for 3:30 this morning, which most people would consider cruel and unusual punishment, but I consider it an honor to be on your show. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Well, Joe, in my opinion, I think that's what champions do.
That's right.
That's what champions do. Champions step up to the plate. Did you hear Jim Rohn just now?
Mm-hmm.
And what became present for you as you was listening to Jim Rohn?
Well, you know, it's funny. I love Jim Rohn. He makes my blood boil. The hair on my arms actually stood up. You know, you listen to men like that, and prior to that, when I was on hold, you had that clip of Napoleon Hill. I know you love Napoleon Hill, as do I, and
yes.
I'm going to share a quick story when we have an opportunity this morning about how Napoleon Hill impacted me. But listening to that kind of stuff, you know, if you listen and you're present for it, a person who has any spark at all can't not want to get in his or her car and leave the house and go affect someone else's life. It makes your blood boil if you have a spark.
Wow, that's pretty good. Now, when we talk about sales, with your book, your book is called The CAP Equation, a foolproof formula for unlimited success in sales. Now, most people say, well, I'm not in sales. I don't sell. But what would you say to that, Joe?
Yeah, most of us don't sell formally. There's a percentage of those listeners this morning that say, well, you know, I don't sell for a living, but really we all sell, don't we? We all, you know, whether we're a parent, a mother, father, we're trying to sell our child on a direction we want them to take for their own good. We want to persuade them. We want to motivate them to do certain things in their life. That's a form of selling. And then when we go to our work, if we are not in outside sales or direct sales or any type of sales business, we still have to sell ourselves, sell our value each day to the person who employs us, who gives us a job, who controls our paycheck if we're in a W-2 position. And sometimes we want to move up that ladder, Rick, and we have to sell ourselves to our boss or his boss if we want a promotion. So I think we're all selling. I think that sales and communication, being able to further our careers, our lives, the lives of our children, the people we want to influence, and sales is about influence, and influence permeates virtually everything we do when we touch another human being. And you can influence people for good, you can influence people for bad, but I imagine everyone listening to What's in Your Hand wants to do, you know, the former. They want to influence people for good. So I think, long answer to a short question, I think we're all selling, and we all need to be better at persuading and motivating people to do the things for good that we want them and need them to do in life.
Right. Now, Jim Rohn, he just said this piece. He said, build a financial wall around your family. Now, when you hear that, and can sales help a person build a financial wall around their family?
Absolutely. For me, I have I'll tell a very quick story about how I got in sales. I got in sales by accident. I was 18 years old, and I was living at home with my parents in Van Nuys, California, a little suburb of the Los Angeles area, the San Fernando Valley. And I had graduated from high school, and I thought I was going to go to college, and I thought I was going to play golf in college because I was a pretty good golfer. we didn't have a lot of money. We were, I'd say we're middle class, but we're slightly below middle class, if I'm going to be honest. And I took a job at a golf course flipping hamburgers in the coffee shop just so I could hit the range balls for free in practice. And because I had that job, I was able to hit 2 large buckets of balls every day, and I got pretty good at golf. Now, you talked about repetition, and repetition is a big part of selling. It's a big part of anything we want to do well. And you still, I still hear stories about Kobe Bryant, even at age 39, showing up early in the gym, especially this off season, shooting hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of shots every morning. So Kobe Bryant's still at it. He's in love with the process. But I decided that I wasn't going to go to college, and I decided I was going to go to work because I wasn't a great student. I was a C-plus student at best. So my father said, well, if you're not going to go to college, then you need to get a job, and a real job, not that job you have flipping hamburgers or that part-time job you have at the liquor store delivering liquor. You need to get a real job. So in those days, Rick, we didn't have the Internet. This was 1979. So I had to get a newspaper. I had to get ink on my hands. I got all inky. And I looked at some classified ads, and there was a ad that said I need 3 people to call on my current customer accounts. And I thought, well, I could do that. I had I could go out and call on. I don't know what they're selling, but I could do that. So I answered that blind ad, and 2 weeks later I was in insurance school getting a license, and I sold $39 accident policies. And the funny thing about it is there really were no customer accounts. It was all cold calling. It was a misleading ad. But it was the best misleading ad that I ever answered in my life because I learned how to cold call. I learned how to knock on a door and get someone's time and attention. And so, through the art of selling, through learning, and I could talk more about this. I could talk about repetition and how important falling in love with the process is. But I fell in love with the process of learning how to sell, learning how to pick up a phone, learning how to knock on a door. And through just that first year or 2 in sales, learning those basic skills, I developed a set of skills that has earned me millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And I started speaking last year, Rick, and one of my coaches said, well, if you're going to start speaking on a national stage, and you really should because you have a great story, you should, offer some credibility. He actually asked me to research how much I've earned in sales so I could tell the audience that was listening to me how much I've earned in sales. So I went back, and, Rick, I don't know, do you keep your tax returns for more than 7 years, or do you shred them right at 7 years?
I keep mine.
Well, I have a wife that has a shredder.
Okay.
And I realized that she'd been shredding because our CPA told us, you don't need to keep those tax returns. So I actually had to go back. I found some summary sheets and some cover sheets and realized I'd earned about somewhere between $22 to $24 million in commissions in my career. And I'm not going to tell you I have all that money. I have a lot of it. I have no idea where my money is. I think my wife spent a little of it. I have most of it. I'm extremely comfortable. But the funny thing is, she lost her American Express Platinum card a few weeks ago, and she said maybe we should call in and let them know it's missing. And I held her off on it. I said, well, don't do that because the person that stole it is probably going to spend less than you, so we'll be in better shape financially.
Oh, wow.
And I'm kidding, but but what happened through learning that just that first year, and I think I have a point to this, that first year or 2 of digging in and doing the repetition that you talked about, learning how to communicate thoughts, ideas, programs, the products I was selling, that set, a very short period of time, many years ago in the late 70s, early 80s, that set of skills has served me well. I carried that set of skills for the rest of my life, and I built a financial wall around myself and eventually my wife and my daughter. And so to me, when Jim Rome says build a financial wall, I think what he's really saying to people like you and me and anyone that's listening this morning that wants to build that financial wall, he's really saying be willing to invest in yourself, put time into yourself and into your chosen vehicle so that you can build that financial wall, because it doesn't happen overnight and it doesn't happen by accident.
I love that. Invest in yourself. That's powerful. Now, the other thing about selling is that, Joe, people are struggling. People are really, really struggling, and they can't get the proper health care. What does, by selling and making that kind of money, how does that help you get the best health care that you need for your family? Let's talk about that.
Well, I happen to have a little bit of knowledge about health care and what President Obama and the current administration has enabled people to do, and there's some good things about that, and then there's some things people complain about. But I think overall, the best part of the Affordable Care Act is if someone has a pre-existing condition, they're not going to get turned down. And I think that's the very best thing that our current administration, our current president, has done with that bill. And again, I think you could argue there's some flaws in it, but at the very least, someone who's struggling now but maybe has a heart condition or a diabetic condition, or maybe suffers from cancer but is under treatment for it, that person could walk in and get coverage today through their state or federal exchange. So that's the good news. But the bad news, Rick, is they still have to pay that premium every month. And as my father told me when he was smoking his Camel cigarette and advising me to get a real job, back in the late 70s, he said, "Son, money doesn't grow on trees." So I think that if someone listening has let's say they have what I call a floor and a ceiling. They have a W-2 income, they have a job, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And they have what we refer to as a fixed ceiling or fixed income or a ceiling. There's nothing stopping them from taking a few extra hours a week, creating a product or selling someone else's product, creating a home-based business, becoming part of an organized network marketing business. So there's a lot of direct selling businesses out there, and many of them are legitimate and legal. Some are not. I think you have to do your research. But there's nothing stopping anyone from creating a product or creating their home-based business, starting to take just a few hours a week to be able to create the extra income they need to buy health care, pay that premium. Or if they don't have a car, create enough additional income to purchase a car, maybe upgrade their vehicle. There's nothing stopping them. There's we have a free enterprise system still today. Hopefully we always do in America. There's nothing that stops, and there's millions of people, Rick, that jump into sales every year and say, well, I'm going to figure this thing out. I'm going to sell a product. I'm going to create a secondary income. So being able to get involved in direct selling the right company with the right product that you're passionate about, and again, it takes some research, but there's nothing that would stop a person from investing 2 hours, 4 hours, 6, 8, 10 hours a week. And if they could earn just a $200 or $400 or $600 a month extra income, it could enable them to pay that insurance premium or be able to get a set of wheels under themselves or upgrade their car, upgrade their apartment or their residential unit. There's nothing stopping them. And I think you could argue that. You could say, well, there's only so many hours in a day. But, like one of my mentors once said, he said, sleep when you're dead. you could always wake up an hour earlier, like I did this morning, or you could stay up a little later. And that's when I did most of my reading. And I'm a voracious reader. I think I mentioned that to you when we met in New York last month. I like to read, and that's when I read. I get up early in the morning and I read and I study. And I don't have a day of college. I don't have one day of formal education, but I've read now over 1,100 books on sales and selling and marketing. And
wow, 1,100.
Yeah, and that's another thing my coach asked me to do, Rick. He said, how many books have you read? I said, well, hundreds. He goes, really? And we started to get into it, and he challenged me to go back and think about the average number of books I read over the 37 years I've been selling and teaching people how to sell. And I came back to him, and one of my assignments before the next coaching session was to tell him how many books I read. I said, the best I could figure, about 1,150. He said, well, just say over 1,000 or 1,100. I said, that's what I'll tell people.
Okay.
And that's the truth. And I still read today. I still read 2 to 3 books a month, at least.
Now, some people would say that, I want to get in, I think one of the reasons why people don't get into sales is because of rejection. People don't like rejection. Can you speak about rejection?
Yeah, I can. It's an interesting word. And the first problem with that statement is, well, there's too much rejection in sales. And I don't think I can handle rejection. The first problem with any way that we phrase that statement is with the word itself. Now, one of the things we teach in my book and my programs, the CAP equation. By the way, CAP, and I know listeners are saying, well, CAP, what is that? Well, CAP is an acronym for competencies plus attitudes multiplied by pipeline equals success in sales. And I'll explain the origin. Remember to ask me. I'll explain the origin of the acronym, the CAP equation. But the CAP equation is simply teaching you how to have enough competencies, say the right things, develop the mindsets, the attitudes, say those things in the right way, and then pipelines, see enough people. And that's really the formula. Those are the 3 areas of sales that we focus on with our students: competencies, attitudes, and then pipelines, having enough people in the pipeline that you can talk to about your product or service. But let me get back to this thing called rejection. And in our programs, we teach something called the metric result philosophy. And the metric result philosophy encourages a reader, encourages a student to reframe and relabel, rename the word rejection. And also you could throw failure in there too. Let's throw failure and rejection into the same pool of words, because you can only, as you know, you can only fail when you quit. As Napoleon Hill taught us, there really is no failure. The failure happens when you walk away and you give up. And pros don't do that. Pros continue to refine until the failures happen less often. They stumble forward. They fail forward, as the great John Maxwell says. But let's take rejection, let's take failure, and let's analyze those 2 words. When someone says, I'm getting a lot of rejection out there, they're really not using the right word, because if you or I joined a company tomorrow and started selling part-time or full-time, and if we talked to a prospect and that prospect said, I don't want to give you an appointment, or I'll give you an appointment, but then after our presentation of our products or programs, they said, I'm really not interested. We can easily walk away, Rick, and say, well, I was rejected. But really, if you think about the word rejection and you analyze that, it's not logical, because you personally weren't rejected at all. They don't even know you. They may have spoken to you for a few minutes on the telephone, or you may have walked into their place of business, and they might have seen your face and decided to either grant you an appointment or not grant you an appointment, but they don't know you personally. They're not rejecting you personally, so it's not personal rejection. So to take it personally is illogical. So they're not rejecting you personally, and if you're even able to give a presentation and they say no or no, not right now, they say no right now, not right now, they're not rejecting you permanently. There may be an opportunity to call back on them at some time in the future, put them back in your pipeline, and recycle that lead. But also in many cases, when I leave a presentation and they didn't say yes, they didn't give me an order for my product or program, I feel they really didn't understand the value of it.
Okay.
And how can you reject something when you really don't fully understand the value of it? And how can you look at something as personal rejection when, gosh, they don't even know you personally? So what we do is we use the wrong words. And so instead of rejection, instead of saying I failed, what we teach people to do is understand all of that as a metric result. It's a metric. It's a piece of data to be analyzed later. And we strip the emotion out of it. And once I can get a professional full-time or part-time salesperson thinking that way, the no's become little signposts on the way to a yes. And it strips the emotion out of it. So there is really no such thing as rejection. And then we could throw failure in there and say there's no such thing as failure, because really it's just a metric result that we can analyze in volume later after we're done working, after we're done talking to, tens or hundreds of people over the course of weeks or months. We can look for trend lines. We can fail forward. We could stumble forward. So I teach, and I hope this makes sense, I teach that there really is no such thing as rejection or failure. It's all just metric data. It's to be looked at unemotionally. And, no is the way that we get to yes.
Now, what if you know the person?
Well, if you know them well and they personally rejected you, you may want to look in the mirror. Sometimes selling, Rick, to someone, selling a product or service or program to someone we know really, really well is just the hardest thing to do. And I don't recommend initially that someone go to their closest and best friends to practice their pitch. Sometimes it's great to practice your pitch and refine and hone what you're doing, cold calling, and then slowly work into your center of influence. I like to back into it, but most people do the opposite. They jump into sales, they run to their closest friends and relatives and want to pitch, and the problem is those people know you pretty well. And if you haven't had a lot of success, and if you've been in a lot of things, a lot of deals, a lot of gigs, and you have a reputation, that follows you. So sometimes it's easier, and there's less rejection, and it's less personal when you start with a colder center of influence versus your warm center of influence. So just a thought there.
Right. Now, some people would consider themselves not a people person, sort of shy. As opposed to selling is concerned, does a person that's outgoing and the people person have an advantage over a shy person? And can the shy person also be great at sales?
I believe so, and and this is hard to believe, but I'll ask the audience to swallow it whole. I was not an extremely outgoing young man at age 18 when I decided to become involved in sales. I had certain qualities. I would say I was stubborn, and I think the quality of stubbornness, it goes hand in hand with being persistent. I think I was stubborn. I think I was persistent, but I was not outgoing. I wasn't I was probably more reserved and quiet. I was probably I call it being in your head. I was in my head a lot. But I think that served me well because I was an analytical sort. I took the information, I took the presentation that I was given, and I memorized it. And then I personalized it, I internalized it. I think a quiet person, a person that considers themselves shy, only needs to focus. They don't need to focus on that because they're giving themselves an excuse to fail. They need to focus on the right things, and the right things are the competencies. What am I being asked to say in my appointment setting script and my presentation script? What does it mean? What's the value of the product I'm selling? How does it create a new reality for the person that would buy the program or the product? How would it change your life? I think you have to focus on the right things, and that's what you're saying and how you deliver it. And whether someone is reserved or shy or not aggressive, I think it has little to do with the way we sell today. And Rick, also the way we sell today is different than the way we sold even 7 to 10 years ago, 20 years ago. When I came into sales, sales was about pitching. It was a one-way conversation, and that's not so true today. What has changed about the way we sell is that millennials want to be engaged. Even baby boomers and some of the generations in between, we want to be engaged. We want to be involved in the process. We want to be asked questions. We want to have a conversation with a salesperson. We want to be guided to a decision. We don't want to be sold. So I think if someone's shy or reserved, I think that's just an excuse. I'll go so far as saying that's a good excuse, and that'll work if you don't want to jump into sales. That reason will work just as well as the next one. But I think it's BS, if I could if I could be so bold as to say that. I think that if you could learn the competency of communicating the value of your product, service, or program, and you understand how to ask the right questions, I think if you can have a conversation as we're having, and you ask the right questions, I think you can be a very effective salesperson in 2015.
Okay, this is good. Hold on, Joe, I would like to identify ourselves, and we are...
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rick Young. I'm the host of What's in Your Hand. We're at WHCR 90.3 FM. And my guest today is Joe Bazzello. He's the author of The CAP Equation, a foolproof formula for unlimited success in sales. I like that. Now, I like to have fun, Joe. I consider myself a fun person. Let's create a game, a CAP Equation selling game. Let's do that on this. Can we do that? How can we have fun selling?
Now, keeping in mind it's 3 hours earlier here, and I've only had one cup of coffee, but I'm down with that. Let's do it.
Okay. So let's get into the competencies, or how does the CAP Equation work? Because, first of all, attitude, that's very, very important when it comes to anything that you're doing. Would you say that, Joe?
The mindset we take into the game is so critical. It actually, and I think you know this, Rick, attitude, mindsets, the philosophies that we adopt, we kind of all of us settle on a way of thinking. And if that is a positive, progressive way of thinking through things and thinking, feeling, and responding to the things that happen around us, if we have a tendency to, if we're a naturally positive person, and we create those mindsets that buoy us in tough times, it actually has a physical effect on your body. It has a physiological effect on the way you carry yourself. So yeah, the mindsets, the attitudes are so critical. The origin of the CAP equation, by the way, comes from a conversation I had in 1980. So to wind the clock back, I'm selling these $39 accident policies, and I did pretty well at it. I failed miserably at first. I'll use that word failure for the context of this story. But I continued to pick myself up and move forward, and I really learned how to sell, and I sold successfully, and after a year they came knocking on my door and said, we'd like to promote you to field trainer. We'd like you to train others. And I said, well, I've only been here a year. And they said, well, if anyone stays with us a year, we automatically promote them. I looked around, and most of the people that I had started with, Rick, weren't around anymore. And I realized, wow, I'm the last man standing from my training class.
Well, all right.
So I guess if you can stick and stay in commission sales, they'll promote you. So I got promoted, and as a prerequisite for taking that promotion, I had to spend a day in the field with the manager, the sales manager that was, I would say he was the best in the business for our company, our organization at the time. His name was John Jamłkowski, and he was a Polish guy who had served in the Vietnam conflict, and he flew the F-14s, and he was a fighter pilot. And he went about his sales routine, his sales day, probably much like he went about his pre-flight checklist before a mission. He was very disciplined and very rigid in what he did and how he did it. And he loved repetition, and he was in love with the process of doing things right and doing things the same way every time. So very, if you can imagine a fighter pilot with a checklist before they went on their mission, that's about how he went through his work day, his sales day. So I met him early in the morning. He said, we're going to put in a long day, and we did. And John didn't talk a lot. He was, and I would say he was probably shy and reserved, but he was very good at what he did. And so we went out and we called on 40 doors before lunch, and he about wore me out. Now I don't miss a meal. I'm Italian, so lunch is really important to me. So I was ready for lunch around 11:45, and he wasn't ready till about 1:15, and I was famished. I was hungry, and we stopped at this little chili dog stand in Camarillo, California, where we were working that day. It's a suburb about 45 minutes outside of L.A., and so we stopped at this little chili dog stand, and he ordered 3 chili dogs, and I ordered 1, and he about had his 3 chili dogs finished before I had my first one done. And they had told me, they said, ask John a lot of questions, which was hard because John, really wasn't that forthcoming with a lot of information. But I started I started getting into it with him. I said, I realized I was going to have just a sound bite of time between bites of our hot dog to ask a few questions. And I said, John, what's your philosophy on training salespeople? We worked hard this morning. We've knocked on 40 doors. I've learned a lot just by watching you. But what's your overall philosophy? And he said, well, I could sum it up this way. He said, if someone is failing in sales, it's because of one of three reasons. And this is really, I'm going to tell you now, this is the origin in my mind of what became the CAP equation for me, what I refined over 35, 36 years. He said it really breaks down into three categories. He said if someone's failing in sales, then they're either not saying the right things. And I had a pen and I made that note, not saying the right things. And to me, that was competency, being competent at what you do. And then he went on and he said, if they're saying the right things, but they're not saying them in the right way, they're not holding themselves with an air of confidence, then they might be failing also. And to me, that was attitude. So saying the right things is competencies, and saying them in the right way, holding yourself in the right way, became, in my mind, attitude. It's an attitude. And then he said they could be saying the right things and saying them the right way, but if they're not saying them to enough people, they're going to fail also. And to me, that became keeping your pipeline full. So the CAP equation is competencies, attitudes, and pipeline practices. And we finished up our chili dogs. We called on another 40 or 50 doors that afternoon. And John passed away a few years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago, from a brain tumor. But I had a chance to see him. We ran into each other in an office building in Los Angeles. I tried to thank him for that day, and he kind of blew it off. To him, it was just another day of doing a favor for the company and field training a young manager. But what he did remember about that day is he remembered exactly how many people we called on and how many people said no and how many people said yes.
Wow.
So he was so in love with the process that he, I think his mind was like a computer. But the CAP equation, competencies, attitudes, and pipeline practices, that's the origin of it. And it took me years to be able to refine my thinking so that I could grab a salesperson, Rick, that was failing, and quickly go to one of those three areas and figure out where I needed to do my work. Was it that the person was not internalizing and personalizing the script and the front talk? Were they all over the place with what they were saying, what they were asking the prospect? Or was the person very competent in that area, but did they have I call it a lovable loser type attitude? Maybe that character Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh was attitude and mindset a problem, or was the person relatively competent? Did they have a very nice attitude, or were they completely mismanaging their pipeline and not seeing enough people? So if someone is failing in the art of selling, it's going to be one of those three categories.
Wow. Wow, pretty powerful. I want to give a shout out to Joe. I want to give a shout out to people that's listening. There's a gentleman named Diego. He's listening all the way from San Pablo, Brazil. And people all around the country are listening to this program. So let me have your website, Joe, so people could look you up and see the work that you're doing. Let me have your website.
Absolutely. The website is www.cap, C-A-P, equation. So if they put CAP equation in, an equation is E-Q-U-A-T-I-O-N, equation. If they put in CAP equation, or if they put in Joe Buzzello, B-U-Z-Z, Buzz, E-L-L-O, they will find me.
Wow. All right. That is, I think this is important. Just going back to the part, Jim Rohn, building a financial wall around your family. I think that's powerful. That says it all. Let's talk about sales wisdom. We were listening to Jim Rohn, and he was talking about having the wisdom. And is there such a thing called sales wisdom? And if it is, what is that?
Yeah, wisdom takes time to develop, doesn't it?
Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Wisdom doesn't happen overnight. So I think you develop wisdom through experience. It's an interesting word. You've got me thinking now, and you've put me on the spot. But as I think through it in my head, as I think out loud, if someone offered me the word wisdom, the first thing that comes to mind is wisdom comes through experience. It happens over a period of time. So I think what happens in sales is you jump in and you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you think you're going to tear the world apart with your company and win every award. And maybe you will, but maybe you won't. Maybe you're going to be a slower starter. Maybe you're going to have some comeuppance. Maybe some people are going to say no. Maybe you're going to feel like you're personally rejected. And I think wisdom comes from experience. But I think Napoleon Hill has taught us that the race doesn't always go to the swiftest. It's the person who decides to get up when they would call something a failure or, a lack of a positive response, and they dust themselves off. So I think wisdom comes when you give yourself the courtesy, when you give yourself the ability, the permission to fail and to stumble forward. So I think it's a lot about stumbling forward. I think that you have to be willing to put in your 10,000 hours, Rick, and I think that this is this is what creates wisdom. And the 10,000 hours, I talk about that a lot. It comes from Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers. The True Story of Success is the subtitle of Outliers. Malcolm Gladwell has written some great books, and they're books that probably have nothing to do with sales and probably everything to do with sales. But the 10,000 hours is a theory or philosophy or hypothesis that he presents in that book. And he uses very, very concrete examples, and the Beatles are one of his examples. People think of the Beatles and the British invasion of rock music into the Americas as we think of the Beatles as an overnight sensation, but the Beatles invested their 10,000 hours. They were in all those clubs in Hamburg, Germany, playing 3 sets a night until they knew, and talk about, we're going back to your repetition again, aren't we, Rick?
That's right. There you go.
Falling in love with the process, falling in love with the work. The Beatles were willing to put in their 10,000 hours. They did 3 sets a night, the same songs, until they knew those songs so well they didn't have to think about them. They could laugh and tell jokes while they were playing and singing the songs. If you see those old black and whites of those Hamburg shows, I've seen a few of them, they are cracking up and cutting up on stage. But if you close your eyes, they're not missing a beat. They're not missing a word. They're just having fun because they put in their 10,000 hours. So Malcolm Gladwell theorizes that everything great that's ever been accomplished that you think is an overnight sensation took that person about 10,000 hours to hone their craft. He uses Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. He uses incredible examples. So I read that book and I thought, this validates what I did. And 10,000 hours, by the way, takes you about 3 years.
Okay.
If you're working full time at your craft, you're going to be in it for about 3 years before someone would recognize you as an expert, point at you and say, Rick Young is an expert at blank. Joe Bozzello is an expert at blank. So my first question for the listeners, something that they could take away and think about, and we talk about this inside the book, The CAP Equation. By the way, The CAP Equation is available in Kindle format and paperback format. And if you're Kindle Unlimited, Rick, I want your readers to know this is free. You just go on, if you're Kindle Unlimited, it's free. And it's 250 pages of wisdom. There's wisdom in there because it took me 36 years to congeal some of this wisdom. But the question I want listeners to ask is, are you, of themselves, am I willing to put in my 10,000 hours? First of all, am I willing to invest that time in my craft to become someone that is an expert, that people can point out and say, boy, John or Mary really knows his or her stuff? And then the secondary question is, am I willing to honor the work? Not just put in the hours, but really almost daily think about how can I get better at what I'm doing? So are they willing to honor the work? Are they willing to put in the hours in the first place? But are they willing to really honor the work? So I believe that wisdom comes because you're willing to put in the time and you're willing to honor the work. And I think that if someone is willing to do that, it's nearly, this is the closest thing I could give someone to a guarantee. If they're willing to commit to some short-term pain for the long-term result of building a financial wall around their family, creating financial freedom, it's almost assured if they're willing to put in that time and honor the work. Does that make sense?
that makes a lot of sense. Now I want to challenge you, Joe. Let's say I'm going to put $100 in your pocket, but I'm going to put you in a city where you know no one. You can't get on the phone and make a landline a help call. You have to work with your skills of what you know. Here you are in the city. You don't know anyone. $100 in your pocket. You got to find a place to live, and you got to eat with that $100. What is Joe Basello going to do to get himself up and running?
$100 in my pocket. Now, so let me get this straight. First, I have to find a place to live.
Well, you got to be creative. You got to be creative. That's what creativity. That's what creativity and imagination is about.
Well, now I'm happily married, so don't take this out of context. But I am a pretty good-looking guy.
Okay. Okay.
So I might go hang out in a bar. And I'm not a big drinker, but I can nurse a beer. So I think that if you drop me out of a helicopter into a city, the city of New York, with $100 in my pocket, I think the first thing I would do is I would offer my services for free. I would find the kind of work that I wanted to do. I would investigate my passion, whether, maybe I love to cook. I would go into a restaurant. I would offer my services. There's probably no one that's walked in that day to the restaurant manager and I would make sure I was dressed properly and I was groomed properly. And I would walk in and say, look, I would like a job as a short order cook. Let's use that for an example. If that was the kind of work I did or wanted to do. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy food preparation. I will work for free. I will outwork everyone you have in the back. You don't need to pay me. I will work for 2 days for free, and if you like me, you can hire me. And if they had no help wanted sign out on the front door, I assure you within 2 days, if I asked enough restaurant owners, within hours I'd have a job, and within 2 days I'd have a permanent position. Because I would have differentiated myself from everyone else. When's the last time a sales manager for a company got a phone call from a salesperson, and that person said, I think I want to sell your products or services, and I'm willing to work for a week on no commission to prove to you that I'm willing to work. You don't even have to pay me. I'll go out and sell your products and services at no cost. I think we have to differentiate ourselves. I think we live in a world of entitlement, Rick, and I don't think we're used to surviving in the jungle. But if you're going to survive in this jungle, I think you have to, and this would work if someone has a W-2 position, your listeners that are thinking about this concept. If you want to move to the next rung of the ladder, if you want to climb the corporate ladder you're in, offer to do work at no compensation. Offer to do the jobs that people, and Napoleon Hill talks about this, do the jobs that people don't want to do. Differentiate yourself, offer yourself up. So I think that if you drop me from a helicopter in a strange land, in a strange city, I would first differentiate myself. I'd be willing to do the things that most people aren't willing to do in this entitled states of America.
Wow, that's powerful, Joe. And believe it or not, we're at the end. Can you believe it? We're at the end already. Wow, that was fun. I think we might have to do this again because I think sales is so important, and that piece of building a financial wall around you and your family. I just can't. That's powerful. What Jim Rohn said: build a financial wall around you and your family. I got to have you back, Joe.
Well, I would love to come back. That would be again. It would be my pleasure and my honor. And if one other thing for the listeners out there, the Cap Equation site, if you go to it and they push a button that says free tools or free access, over the next 2 months, the months of November and December, I am off the road. I am not speaking. I'm just creating and pushing out content. I'll have 15 to 18 absolutely free complimentary pieces of audio and video training for them as subscribers, and it doesn't cost them a thing. It's my way of giving back. During November and December, I'm off the road, so I'm just home writing, creating, producing podcasts and video content.
Wow. Thank you, Joe. Let me have your website again, Joe.
It's www.cap, like baseball cap, cap equation, EQUATION, capequation.com.
Right. I got to have you back because we were supposed to do that Saturday thing and we kind of messed up our schedule. So I got to have you back. And this is something that I really want to share with people because, again, my reason, I want people to build a financial wall around themselves and their family. Repetition. I'm going to keep repeating that.
Fall in love with the process. And when I do come back on, we ran out of time, but I want to tell you about my seminal moment with Napoleon Hill.
Got to come
great
back.
Story.
Got to bring you back. All right, Joe. Take care. Talk to you soon. Continue success. Thank you for getting up so early in the morning in California.
Well, Rick, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun. Thank you.
All right. Continue success to you and your family.
Thank you, Rick.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Joe Basello, author of The Cap Equation. Joe Basello, spelled Buzzzello. Joe Basello. This is Rick Young. I'm going to sign off now. And I'm going to listen to that Jim Rohn piece again. Why not you? No, why are you doing this? And why not you? And why not you? And why not now? Sure. How about that? Jim Rohn, ladies and gentlemen. Another piece of Jim Rohn. I like this. Like this piece.
I want you to ponder these 4 questions.
I will see you on Sunday at 2 p.m. Another segment of What's in Your Hand.
First question to ponder when you go home is why? Why go this far? Why try to learn this much? Why study? Why put yourself out? Why try to earn as much as you can earn, share as much as you can share? Why try to become all that you can possibly become? Why develop yourself to the full? Why try to do it all? Why try to take on this much responsibility? Develop every skill you possibly can, see every human you possibly can, go to every class you possibly can, touch everybody you possibly can. Why do that much? Why go that far? Why share that much? Why give that much away? Why try to see everything? Why try to do everything? Why try to become everything? The first question to ponder when you go home is why. Here's another good answer to why. It's the second question. Why not? Why not see how much you can earn? Why not see how much you can learn? Why not see how many skills you can develop? Why not see what kind of person you can become? Why not see what kind of influence you can have? Why not see how many people you can rescue from oblivion? I want you to take that personal. Why not? Why not? You've got to stay here till you go. I mean, what else are you going to do? Why not see how much you can do, how far you can go? Now, here's number 3. Why not you? You've got the brains. You can make decisions. You can study the plan. You can change your life. You can grow immensely in the next few years. You can make your dreams come true. You can build a financial wall around your family nothing can get through. You can become healthy. You can become powerful. Why not you? My very last question on the questions to ponder is why not now? There never was a better time. And what a time now for us to take this dream and not let it die. Take this dream and give it life. Take this dream and breathe into it your own personal spirit until finally it becomes a flame that burns around the whole world.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Don't touch that dial. Keep it locked on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Estoy en todos los autobuses escolares, todos los patios de recreo y todas las aulas. Voy a la escuela con sus hijos. Decimos el juramento de la bandera juntos. Soy uno de cada 4 niños estadounidenses y paso hambre a diario. Mis maestros dicen que en este país podemos ser lo que deseamos cuando seamos grandes. Quiero ser alguien que no se vaya a dormir con hambre. Visite feedingamerica.org para diagonal español hoy y busque su banco de alimentos local para saber cómo ayudar. Cada dólar que dona ayuda a ofrecer 7 comidas a niños que luchan silenciosamente con el hambre. Juntos alimentamos a nuestro país. Presentado por Feeding America y Ad Council.
En el próximo episodio de Recetas para el Desastre...
Esta noche nuestro vecino Paul viene a comer una barbacoa. Por eso estoy preparando una deliciosa marinada de limón y romero de mi colección especial de antiguas recetas familiares. Para asegurarme de que los bistecs estén súper tiernos, los dejé marinando sobre la mesada toda la noche, como solía hacerlo mi nana.
Sin un manejo de alimentos adecuado, las buenas intenciones de María pueden terminar mal. Para evitar enfermedades, siempre descongele o marine alimentos en el refrigerador a 40 grados Fahrenheit o menos. Paul, el vecino de María, no pensó en el bistec que comió hasta que estaba presentando las proyecciones financieras a la junta de su empresa y un ataque repentino de intoxicación por alimentos dejó en claro que no solo las utilidades estaban en ascenso. Descubre más recetas para el desastre en foodsafety.gov y aprende los pasos correctos que María omite. Un mensaje de USDA, HHS y el Ad Council.
¿Dónde está bebé? Sonríe. Anda, sonríe. Cariño, el bebé sigue sin sonreír.
Quizás no es de los que sonríen tanto.
Sí, quizás no sea un bebé muy alegre.
Quizás es solo parte de ser niño.
O quizás le duelen las encías. Pobrecito, es que le están creciendo los dientes.
Quizás solo está cansado.
O quizás le duele la panza. No comió mucho.
Quizás no tiene cosquillas.
¿Crees que quizás le tenga miedo al perro?
Quizás se le pase cuando crezca o quizás está pasando por una etapa. No sé, quizás es solo que no le gusta sonreír.
Quizás tenga autismo y seguro podemos hacer algo para ayudarlo.
Quizás es todo lo que necesitas para aprender más sobre el autismo. La ausencia de grandes y alegres sonrisas a los 6 meses es una de las primeras señales. Aprende las demás señales en autismspeaks.org/aprende o consulta a un doctor hoy para una prueba de autismo. Mientras más pronto se diagnostique, mejor. Y puedes hacer una gran diferencia en su vida. Un mensaje de Autism Speaks y el Ad Council.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Te doy mi amor, mi corazón, mi vida entera, pero no quiero que sufras por mí. Por eso quiero verte de esa manera, porque las leyes lo dictan así. Y me voy sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, ni un abrazo, tampoco un hasta luego. Sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, ni un abrazo, tampoco un hasta luego. Sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, tampoco un hasta luego. Yo te aseguro con el tiempo y la distancia, sin mi presencia tú te irás acostumbrando. Y aunque lo nuestro sigue siendo imposible, con mi alma y mi corazón te sigo amando. Si yo me voy sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, ni un abrazo, tampoco un hasta luego. Sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, ni un abrazo, tampoco un hasta luego. Te digo Te aseguro con el tiempo y la distancia, sin mi presencia tú te irás acostumbrando. Y aunque lo nuestro siga siendo un imposible, con mi alma y mi corazón te sigo amando. Yo me voy sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, ni un abrazo, tampoco un hasta luego. Sin despedirme, sin darte un beso, ni un abrazo, tampoco un hasta luego. Alza tu copa, llévala a tu boca y brindemos por el adiós. ¿No ves que nuestro amor se está muriendo? ¿No ves que afuera está lloviendo? Todo es un cuadro de dolor. Así como yo, tal vez así disimulemos, sintiendo que algo nos queremos, todo será mucho mejor. Seca tus lágrimas con mi pañuelo, no ves que afuera está llorando el cielo. Vete ya, que se ahoga mi voz y no hagamos más cruel este adiós, ay, vete ya, que se ahoga mi voz y no hagamos más cruel este adiós, Toma, alza de nuevo tu copa, llévala a tu boca y brindemos por el adiós. ¿No ves que nuestro amor se está muriendo? ¿No ves que afuera está lloviendo? Todo es un cuadro de dolor. Así como yo, tal vez así disimulemos, sintiendo que algo nos queremos, todo será mucho mejor. Seca tus lágrimas con mi pañuelo, no ves que afuera está llorando el cielo. Vete ya, que se ahoga mi voz y no hagamos más cruel este adiós, ay, vete ya, que se ahoga mi voz y no hagamos más cruel este adiós, Otra vez, esto es de nosotros.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Quisiera detener